The sun beat down mercilessly on the quiet suburban street, a heat wave pressing in from all sides. But in the midst of the summer heat, there was a fire that burned far hotter than the sun, one that wasn't just in the air, but in the hearts of those involved. What would you do if you saw someone you loved locked in a car, the flames rising around them? What if that person was your own daughter? My heart was pounding in my chest as I sprinted toward the car, the heat from the flames licking at my skin. The air was thick with smoke, and the crackle of burning metal and plastic filled the silence, drowned out only by the frantic thoughts racing through my mind. Time was running out. She couldn't breathe. I could hear her desperate gasp from inside. And then there she was, my little girl, trapped. The one person I swore to protect with every ounce of my being, caught in a nightmare, and all because of one person's decision. The HOA Karen. She didn't know who I was, but I knew everything about her. I knew the way she had made my family's life hell with her constant complaints, the relentless scrutiny, the never-ending demands for us to follow rules that made no sense. But none of that mattered now. None of it mattered as I stared at the woman standing there, smirking in the background, thinking she was untouchable. She had no idea that I was more than just a concerned father. I was a police commander, and I wasn't going to let her get away with this. But in that moment, with the flames closing in and the seconds slipping away, I was faced with a choice. Would I stand there, paralyzed by anger and fear, or would I risk everything to save my daughter? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you act, even if it meant putting yourself in harm's way to save someone you love? Or would you just watch, knowing it's too late? I had seen my fair share of chaos over the years, but nothing could have prepared me for the nightmare that was unfolding right in front of my eyes. The neighborhood I had once considered peaceful, a place where families came together, had become a battlefield, and the enemy was far closer than I realized. I was a police commander, used to responding to emergencies, often involving dangerous criminals and life-threatening situations. But when it came to my family, nothing mattered more than their safety. My daughter, Sarah, had always been the light of my life. Born with a disability, she had struggled more than most kids her age, but she was strong, brave, and full of life. The way she lit up any room she walked into made it impossible not to love her. That afternoon, Sarah and I were supposed to be enjoying a quiet afternoon together. We had planned on doing something simple, just the two of us, maybe grab some ice cream or take a walk in the park. It wasn't much, but after everything we'd been through, those small moments meant everything. However, my plans were violently interrupted by the sound of a knock at the door. It was her, the HOA Karen. Karen had made our lives miserable for months. From her constant complaints about my lawn to the threats of fines for the smallest infraction of the HOA rules, it was clear that she had a personal vendetta against us. But I never imagined she would go this far. She stood there on my doorstep, her arms crossed, her lips curled into a tight, judgmental frown. Your daughter's playing outside again, and it's too noisy. The HOA rules state. I cut her off before she could finish, my patience running thin. Karen, this is a free country. If you don't like the sound of a child playing, maybe it's time you find a new neighborhood. But Karen didn't leave. Instead, she became more insistent, and soon it escalated. She had made it clear that she wasn't just after rules anymore. She was after control. Without warning, she walked straight past me and towards my car, where Sarah had been sitting in the back seat, waiting for me to finish the conversation. The next thing I knew, Karen locked the doors, trapping Sarah inside, the engine still running. Let her out, I shouted, rushing towards the car. But Karen only looked at me with a smug expression. She's too noisy. This is the HOA's rule. She stays in there until you get the message. My heart sank. My little girl, trapped in that car. The air was thick, the temperature rising rapidly. She was in danger. I could see her through the window, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with fear. The heat wasn't just coming from the sun anymore. The flames, hidden at first, were beginning to crackle along the edges of the car. I knew we were running out of time. But Karen, oblivious to the disaster she had just set into motion, simply stood there, completely unaware of the nightmare she had just created. I took a deep breath. There was no more time for words. I was no longer just a father trying to protect his daughter from an unreasonable neighbor. I was a police commander, and it was time to act. I charged towards the car, but as I moved, something hit me. Karen didn't know who I was. She didn't know that I was the one person in this neighborhood who could stop her in an instant. As I yanked at the door handle, the flames spread, licking at the car's sides. There was no time to waste. I had to save Sarah before it was too late. But with Karen standing in the background, still oblivious to the imminent danger, it felt like I was facing the battle of a lifetime. I wasn't just fighting the fire. I was fighting the woman who had been poisoning our lives with her rules, and now it was time for me to break the most important rule of all. Never back down when it comes to family. I just hoped I could save her before it was too late. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as I yanked at the door handle again. The heat from the flames was unbearable now, and the air was thick with smoke. How long did I have? The clock in my head was ticking faster than I could keep up with. Sarah's face was still pressed against the glass, her wide eyes locked on mine. Her lips parted in a desperate plea, but no sound came from her. She was terrified, but I wasn't the only one who was scared. As I pulled harder on the car door, I could see Karen standing a few feet away, arms crossed, a strange calmness about her. She wasn't moving to help, wasn't rushing toward the car to unlock the door. In fact, she seemed almost bored, like this was just another inconvenience to her, another rule being broken by someone who didn't belong in her perfect little world. "Karen," I shouted, the heat from the fire searing my throat as I tried to stay calm. "What the hell are you doing? Let my daughter out of the car now." She didn't respond right away. She just stood there, staring at me with that same condescending expression that made my blood boil. Her eyes narrowed as if she were sizing me up, not realizing that every second she wasted could be the difference between life and death. Finally, she spoke, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're just making a scene, David. She's been running around, making noise all afternoon. She doesn't belong here. She should learn the rules. I'm just trying to enforce them, and you're letting her run wild." My hands clenched into fists. The audacity. She was more concerned with her HOA rules than the life of a child. My child, who was literally trapped in a burning car. The flames were getting higher, licking at the tires, the engine groaning as it burned from the inside. I couldn't waste any more time arguing. I turned back to the car, now realizing that pulling at the handle wasn't enough. The lock was jammed from the inside, and the smoke was starting to pour from every crack. I could hear Sarah gasping for air through the glass, her body slumping in the seat, her face turning pale. My stomach twisted into knots. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, but I shoved it aside. I was a police commander, and panic wasn't an option. I needed to think. I needed to act. Think fast. Should I break the window? The glass was reinforced. Would I have enough time to get her out? But then, the realization hit me. The car had a sunroof. I ran to the top of the car and grabbed the emergency tool I kept in my jacket pocket, the one that was meant for situations like this. I ripped the sunroof open, shoving it back as the smoke poured out of the car. The heat was suffocating, but I could see her now, Sarah's hand weakly reaching out. "Hold on, sweetheart," I shouted, my voice hoarse with desperation. "I'm coming, just hold on." But Karen didn't move. She stood there, watching, as if this were some game of hers. "You're making a huge mistake," I warned, the frustration in my voice barely contained. "I swear to God, Karen, you have no idea who you're dealing with." But she just shook her head, her lips curling into that smug, self-righteous smile. "I'm just following the rules. You should have taught your daughter better. She's breaking them, not me." I couldn't believe my ears. The woman was standing in front of a car on fire, talking about rules. It was as if she didn't even care that this was a matter of life and death. She wasn't going to stop until I forced her to face reality. I reached down into the car, finally able to grasp Sarah's wrist through the opening. Her eyes locked onto mine with a mixture of fear and hope. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about teaching Karen that some things were more important than rules. With every ounce of strength I had left, I pulled Sarah through the sunroof, her small body trembling as I hoisted her into my arms. The fire roared behind us, but I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that she was alive. The second my feet hit the ground, I heard Karen's voice again. "You're crazy," she spat, looking down at us from her perch on the sidewalk. "That wasn't necessary. I was just trying to." Before she could finish her sentence, I stepped in front of her, my eyes cold and hard. "Enough," I said, my voice low but steady. "You've done enough damage." Her face flushed a deep red as she realized who I was. I could see the fear start to creep into her expression. She had underestimated me, underestimated my love for my daughter. She had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. And in that moment, I knew the game was over. She had no idea who she was messing with. The car was a furnace now. The flames had completely engulfed the sides, licking up to the windows, crackling like a hungry beast tearing through paper. The heat was unbearable. I could feel my skin singeing with each second I stayed near it. The smell of burning rubber and metal mixed with the thick, acrid smoke in the air. It was suffocating, but my focus was razor sharp. There was no room for hesitation, no time for anything but action. I had Sarah in my arms now, but the fear was still there. The seconds felt like hours, and I could hear her coughing, her breath still shallow from the smoke she had inhaled. My chest tightened as I looked at her fragile, trembling form. I couldn't imagine what she had gone through inside that car, trapped in the suffocating heat with no way out. "Are you okay, baby?" I whispered, trying to steady my voice. She nodded weakly, her eyes wide with fear and relief. But I could tell she was scared. Her tiny hand gripped my shirt tightly, as though afraid I might disappear if she let go. And I couldn't blame her. I had almost lost her. But the danger wasn't over yet. The fire was still raging, and we were too close to it. I could feel the burn on my skin even from this distance. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the area, trying to come up with a plan. The fire was spreading fast, and I knew the car wouldn't last much longer. It was only a matter of time before the whole thing would explode, the flames consuming everything in their path. I looked back at Karen. She was still standing there, frozen in place, watching the scene unfold. I could see the surprise, the shock in her face. She hadn't expected me to do what I did, hadn't expected me to save my daughter, and now she was realizing just how far things had escalated. "Are you happy now?" I shouted, my voice sharp and filled with anger. "You've ruined everything. This isn't just about your stupid rules anymore. This is about a child's life." Her face turned pale as I stepped forward, holding Sarah close. I could feel the tension in the air, a thick cloud of guilt and denial hanging around her like a storm ready to break. For a moment, she didn't respond. She just stared at us, her mouth slightly agape, as if she couldn't comprehend the situation. How could she? How could someone so blind to the pain they caused ever understand the true weight of their actions? And then something changed. I could see it in her eyes, the realization that she had crossed a line. She wasn't just the HOA president anymore. She wasn't just some neighbor who complained about a little noise or a broken fence. She had trapped an innocent child in a burning car. Her actions had nearly cost Sarah her life. For a brief second, I saw the faintest flicker of remorse in her expression, but it was quickly replaced with defensiveness, her pride rising to the surface. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she finally said, her voice faltering. "I just wanted to teach you a lesson, David. You've been breaking the rules. Your daughter's behavior." I cut her off, the anger bubbling to the surface once again. "No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to hide behind rules while a child's life is in danger. Your so-called rules almost cost my daughter her life, and that is something you'll never be able to take back. This isn't just about a little noise or a violation. It's about the fact that you don't care about people. You only care about yourself and your control." Her lips trembled, but she didn't respond. What could she say? The truth was staring her in the face, and for once, she was silent. I glanced over at the burning car. The fire was still raging, but the car itself was beginning to buckle under the pressure. It wasn't going to last much longer. I needed to make sure we were as far away from it as possible. I wasn't going to lose my daughter. "Let's go, Sarah," I said softly, gently pulling her toward me. Her tiny feet stumbled, but I kept a firm grip on her, not letting go for a second. The fire was close, but I wasn't going to let it take anything from me. Not now, not after everything we'd been through. We started walking away from the car, my heart still pounding, my mind racing. The world felt like it was slowing down, everything shifting in and out of focus as I tried to process what had just happened. The heat from the flames burned in my lungs, but I didn't care. I was with my daughter. She was safe. Behind us, the fire continued to consume the car, the explosion inevitable. I could hear the metal groaning, the heat building. And then the explosion came. It was deafening. The shockwave hit us like a punch to the chest, sending a jolt of adrenaline through my body. But I didn't stop walking. I could feel Sarah's trembling form in my arms, her face pressed against my chest. She was quiet now, but I could sense the fear still lingering in her heart. I knew that what she had experienced would haunt her for a long time, and I would never forget it either. But as we walked away, one thing was clear. Karen had underestimated me, underestimated my love for my daughter, my willingness to protect her at any cost. I wasn't just a police commander. I was a father, and nothing in this world could make me back down from that. Karen would have to live with what she had done. But for me, the only thing that mattered was that Sarah was safe. We had survived this nightmare, and I would make sure she never had to go through something like this again. The explosion had sent a wave of heat and dust into the air, and the sound reverberated through the street like the final verdict of a long-fought battle. But the fight wasn't over yet. The fire was still burning, the car's twisted frame now a blackened shell of what it once was. But we were alive, and that, above all else, was what mattered. I held Sarah tightly as we moved further away from the wreckage. The thick smoke lingered, stinging my eyes, but I didn't care. I had to focus on her now. She was shaken, trembling uncontrollably, but she was alive. She was safe. As we reached the sidewalk, I set her down on a bench, my hands brushing her hair back as I tried to comfort her. Her wide, terrified eyes met mine, and I could see the question in them. Why did this happen? How did it all go so wrong? I knelt down to her level, trying to push away the fear gnawing at my insides. It's okay now, Sarah. You're safe. You don't have to be afraid anymore. She nodded weakly, but the fear in her eyes didn't go away. I understood. No child should ever have to experience something like that. It wasn't just the fire that terrified her. It was the sense of helplessness, the feeling of being trapped. And it wasn't just Sarah who had been affected. The whole neighborhood had seen the chaos unfold. People who had been watching from their windows, neighbors who'd stepped outside to see what was happening, all frozen in disbelief. They were witnessing something they never expected to see, a quiet suburban street turned into a battleground, all because of a single, thoughtless woman's actions. Karen stood at the edge of the sidewalk, a cold expression on her face. She hadn't moved. She was still processing, still trying to justify what she had done. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. I took a deep breath and stood up, turning to face her. Her smugness was gone. Her earlier self-assurance was replaced with something else now. Fear. You. I started, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You almost killed my daughter, Karen. You locked her in a burning car, and you didn't care about the consequences. You didn't care about her life, or about the people who would have to live with the aftermath of your actions. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say to defend herself. She had made a critical mistake, and now the weight of it was crashing down on her. I took a step closer. This isn't about a broken fence or some silly HOA rule. This is about a child's life, and you put that life in danger for your own petty reasons. You have no idea the damage you've caused today. Finally, her face shifted. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was something deeper. Regret. Realization. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, her voice small, barely above a whisper. I just want to make you follow the rules, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think. You didn't think? I interrupted, incredulous. Of course you didn't. You never thought about how your actions could destroy a family. You never thought that someone might end up in danger because you were so focused on your so-called rules. What did you think would happen when you locked a disabled child in a car in the middle of a heat wave? She looked down, the weight of her actions too heavy for her to bear. I'm sorry, she murmured, her voice shaky. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. But it was too late for apologies. Actions speak louder than words. And Karen's actions had nearly cost my daughter her life. I had never felt so helpless, so furious in all my years of service. And this woman, standing before me, was the reason why. I don't think you understand, I said, my voice now calm but firm. It's not about sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back a life that was nearly lost. Sorry doesn't heal the trauma of a child being locked in a burning car. Sorry doesn't undo the fear that Sarah felt today. You've changed our lives forever. Karen stood there, her eyes wide with shock, but I didn't care. The damage had been done. Just then, the sound of sirens filled the air, cutting through the tension like a blade. The authorities were here, and this wasn't going to go unnoticed. As much as Karen might have thought she could get away with this, the reality of her actions was starting to catch up to her. I turned my back on her, not even bothering to watch her try to defend herself. There was no point in continuing this conversation. The truth was clear, and the only thing left now was for her to face the consequences of what she had done. I kneeled beside Sarah again, placing my arm around her. She was still trembling, but I could feel the weight of the worst of it lifting. The fear in her eyes slowly started to fade, replaced by a quiet, fragile relief. "You're okay," I whispered to her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "We're okay." The officers arrived at the scene, and I could see them take Karen aside, asking her questions, trying to get a clear picture of what had happened. But as I stood there, with Sarah in my arms, I realized one thing. This wasn't just about a single moment. It wasn't just about a confrontation in the street or a fiery explosion. It was about the way we, as a society, treat each other. It was about the people who believe that their small, self-righteous rules are more important than human lives. And it was about ensuring that something like this never happened again. Because in the end, the rules don't matter if they put someone's life on the line. Family does. And I would do anything to protect mine. The sirens had faded into the distance, leaving only the soft hum of the world trying to return to normal. But the neighborhood would never be the same, not after today. And neither would I. The fire was gone, the smoke now only a faint memory, but the emotions still hung in the air like an unspoken tension. Sarah was nestled against me, her tiny form tucked into my side as I wrapped my arm around her. We were safe, yes, but the weight of what had happened would linger long after the flames had died. I looked at her, my heart swelling with both relief and sorrow. She had seen too much today. No child should ever have to experience that kind of fear. But I promised myself that no matter what it took, I would make sure she felt safe again. "Are you okay, baby?" I whispered, brushing a lock of hair from her face. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she curled closer, her tiny hands gripping my shirt as though afraid to let go. Her silence spoke volumes. She was still processing what had happened. She had been through hell, and there were no words that could immediately erase that. I held her tighter, offering whatever comfort I could, knowing that in time, she would heal. But it would take time. Trauma wasn't something that could just be wiped away. It stayed with you, carved into your memory, like an indelible mark. I glanced over at the police officers, who were still speaking with Karen. From the look on their faces, I knew the situation was far from over for her. She was going to have to answer for her actions that nearly cost an innocent child her life. I didn't know what the full legal repercussions would be, but I knew one thing. Karen's life would never be the same. She could no longer hide behind her HOA rules or her sense of superiority. Today, the world had witnessed just how far she was willing to go to enforce her twisted sense of order. And in the end, justice would be served. But right now, justice didn't matter as much as healing. Right now, all that mattered was Sarah. I gently lifted her up, standing slowly as I took in a deep breath. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, but I refused to let it cloud my thoughts. I needed to get Sarah home. She needed the comfort of her own space, the soothing rhythm of familiar sounds and sights. She needed peace. I walked with purpose, each step taking us further away from the chaos and closer to the sanctuary of home. As we near our front door, I turned back for a moment, just to make sure Karen wasn't following us. She wasn't. She had no power over us anymore. Inside, I placed Sarah gently on the couch. She curled up into a ball, her body still trembling, but her eyes starting to soften as she adjusted to the quiet comfort of home. I sat beside her, my hand resting on hers. We didn't need words now. All she needed was my presence, and that was something I could give her without hesitation. The minutes passed, and the world outside seemed to fade away. The weight of the past few hours hung heavy, but the storm inside me had started to settle. It wasn't gone. There were still things that needed to be dealt with, still consequences that needed to be faced. But for now, we were safe. I glanced at the clock. The day had started as any other, with ordinary moments that were now anything but. The quiet, normal life we'd known had been shattered in an instant. But as I sat here with Sarah, I realized something profound. It wasn't the disaster, the fire, or even Karen that had truly tested me. It was the choices I made in the aftermath. The decisions I made to protect my daughter, to ensure she knew she was loved and safe. That was what mattered, and I had made those choices with everything I had. As Sarah drifted off to sleep beside me, her body finally giving into exhaustion, I leaned back, my mind racing with thoughts of what had just transpired. The case was far from over, and there were still questions to be answered. But I would face them all. I would face the consequences of Karen's actions, and I would make sure that nothing like this ever happened again. For Sarah, the thought of her growing up in a world where people like Karen existed was unbearable, but I would fight for her safety, for her peace of mind. I would fight so that no other child would ever have to face a monster like that. The silence in the room was a bittersweet comfort. It was the calm after the storm, the stillness before the next challenge. And as I watched my daughter sleep, I vowed to be her shield, her protector. I would never allow anyone to hurt her again. We had survived this nightmare. Now it was time for us to heal. Together. As I sat there, watching Sarah rest, the world outside felt a million miles away. The chaos of the day had subsided, but the weight of what had happened still lingered. This wasn't just about a burning car or a woman who went too far. This was about something far bigger, something that all of us, as human beings, need to remember. The people we love deserve our protection, no matter the cost. We often think that rules, systems, and expectations are what shape our lives. But today, I realized something that could never be taken away. The most important thing in life is the people we choose to protect. And as much as the world around us may try to enforce its control, nothing will ever stop me from protecting my family. If you've been moved by this story, if you believe that protecting the ones we love is worth every fight, don't wait. Take action. Share this story, because it's time we start standing up for each other, and we make sure no one has to face the kind of danger that Sarah did. If you want more stories of survival, resilience, and the fierce love that drives us to act, hit that subscribe button. Join us in this fight for justice and love. Together, we can make sure that the voices of those who are truly vulnerable are heard. And don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let's keep this conversation going, because when we stand together, we can bring change. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. And remember, family always comes first.